thought that you might be able to sort of put in perspective something about what's happening in Britain sort of culturally, because you don't get any sort of idea really out here. I mean, you just get a few pop records which people call American, and they're not. I mean, they call Elton John American, or Paul McCartney. It gets really, there's no real sort of sense of what's really sort of happening. I mean, in Brazil, I think about what's happening in England. I mean, it's a bit like the Beatles. I mean, that's where it stopped. And I just wondered in the sort of the arts, in a sense, not only through sculpture which you're involved in, but I mean, you must be very much aware of things, aren't you?
Well, to a lesser degree now than I have been before, because as one tends to get busier working,
Come in. We cut the tape.
Then you tend to cut out a lot of other stuff, I mean, so you become less aware of it, I think.
But don't you find that, I mean, how you
Unfortunately.
work? Yeah. But are you sort of very much aware of sort of music and sort of these television programs and all this sort of popular culture,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah. I think what's been quite good, and in fact it's what Bruce McLean was saying.
Yes, I thought, Channel 4 is very important.
They've had quite a few TV programs which have tried to have bits of everything, from the arts, from music and poetry, and actually have artists on there talking about a piece of work. And things
They've done it very casually.
Yes,
I mean,
they're very relaxed.
there's a new kind of chat show which is deliberately unprofessional, very casual, very badly put together in one sense, but actually that's deliberate. And there's 2 or 3 shows like that which have artists, musicians, dancers, theatre people, current affairs things, kids,
and they're actually directed and sort of organised by quite young people. I mean, young in terms of television age.
And there's Walter's Weekly as well.
Yes, and the radio. There was a very good program until it got chopped, called Walter's Weekly, which was specifically for the arts and with some, not an overemphasis of music in it at all, which looked at anything you could think of that came within the arts, theatre and music, and quite sort of fringe things that would not normally get covered at all. That was very good. Had a fantastic following. I mean, unknown to the BBC in actual fact.
Was that on the BBC? Was it?
Yes, it was on Radio 1, which was very good. And because what happened was that because it was on Radio 1, which is a pop station, it cultivated a very new audience. Well, this is how I interpret it. Cultivated an audience which was not getting that sort of information at all, and it became very popular. And then the BBC, in its wisdom, inverted commas, chopped it because they thought it was not enough music, and it wasn't sort of 3 minutes chat, 3 minutes of music. It wasn't enough fun.
What was the name of the programme again?
Walter's Weekly.
Who was Walter?
John Walters.
Ah.
And quite a character.
You heard it?
Yeah.
And I mean, I've done 2 interviews with him, and to show the scope the program had, and one of the program was an hour long, and one of the interviews was I mean, they broadcast the whole thing, and it was 20 minutes long. I mean, continuous, which I mean for
the whole
Radio 1,
interview?
yes, which was fantastic.
And what did he ask you? That saves me.
Well, it was a lot easier than this because we were walking around an exhibition of my work, talking about the work.
In the next art student?
Yes, a long time ago. So you had a sort of interest in that area.
But is sculpture kind of a young person sort of thing? It's not a thing I associate it with. I associate it with the younger end of the spectrum, Is it really a sort of young person's area?
There's a tradition of sculpture in Britain, and there happen to be a lot of interesting younger British sculptors at the moment, for reasons partly, I think, to do with the tradition, partly to do with the changes in art education over the past 10 years, partly to do with the sculpture being somewhat more loose as an activity than painting is. It's somewhat harder to say nowadays what sculpture is. So, there's less sort of stretching the bounds now than there were 10 years ago, but the work is much more engaging, less intellectual.
Are both of you, do you both teach in art colleges?
I teach, but Bill doesn't teach.
But in your teaching, what's the feeling amongst the sort of the students? I mean, are they sort of very optimistic? Are they very sort of creative? Do they surprise you in what they do, or are they simply copying what's fashionable? I mean, how do you see that?
There's a bit of, I mean, you can't say it as simply as that. There's a bit of everything. There are students whose work is very dour and very dreary.
Yeah.
And there are students whose work is extremely interesting, extremely exciting. And there are students whose work apes fashions.
Yeah.
And there are other students whose work comes from nowhere. You can't really generalise like that, except that in the places that I teach, the sculpture departments are more interesting than the painting departments. And I think that's
really.
I think that's generally true.
I think that probably always has
but
been.
I mean, it's visually a place where there are a lot of sculptors is always going to be visually more interesting than the place where there's a lot of painters, because sculpture is a spatial activity and it isn't
just two-dimensional.
Just on the wall.
On the canvas.
So it's much more dynamic, and I mean, in the same way as kind of mending a hole in the road is interesting. And sculpture departments have that kind of interest.
Yeah, but I mean, both of you are in a very privileged position in that you are professional sculptors. I mean, it's incredible that you can actually make a living out of it. I mean, do you see that as a privilege, or did you sort of?
I don't make a living. Let's get it straight. Bill makes a living. I don't make a living.
No, but
I
both,
teach.
I mean, here we are.
I teach, and I subsidise very heavily my sculpture making activity, and I have been doing for 10, 12 years. I don't make a living at it. But I do get, I mean, obviously, the other end of the, I mean, the sort of, that's not a complaint, because you're right, I am in a very privileged position compared to a great number of other people.
Yes.
I'm not sure that I have trouble with the word privilege, but
it's a great privilege. I mean, it's nice. I don't think it's not.
Well,
it's not meant to be in any way negative.
No,
in any connotation whatsoever.
I mean, because for myself, I mean, I taught for a long time and subsidised my art activity.
Yeah.
From the money one got from teaching, and that's very hard work, basically. I mean, and it gets harder and harder, and so one thing gradually takes the other over, and I mean, I'm only just recently been actually make a living in terms of making enough money not to teach. So I mean, I don't actually see getting back to the word. I don't actually see it as a privilege given. It's something that's earned.